All right. Now that we are almost done with the mix down of this track, I would like to have a look at some final points, which is how we are going to group the elements, what type of elements we'll put into each group, and what extra processing we are going to do on them besides all the work we've already done on the project. Like I already said, I like to keep my kick separate. We've already grouped the bass. We've done that processing on it. We are then going to select our clap, percussions, drums, and hats. And we'll make it into a drum group. We'll call that drums. Then I like to take all my stereo elements into another group, and that will be my synths, pad, vocal, and just other effects. And we are going to put these into a group which we are going to call stereo. You can do more groups. You can subgroup elements like the vocals and effects if you'd like to do some specific things on them. But here I'm pretty happy with all the processing we've already done on the channels. And yeah, also let me remind you that some of these I have already combined just for the purposes of this video, so it's a bit more compact, and then we don't have too many channels that will get lost in when mixing. So usually I would say 80 to 90% of the cases my projects will look like this at the mix down stage when I'm about to finalize it before sending it over or doing the mastering. Again, kick, my group of bass lines if I have multiple ones. If I don't, I'll just leave the bass line as it is. Then we have the drums and the stereo, and that's all the synths, effects, vocals, all my stereo elements go in there. Looking at the bass, we might have forgotten to save the bass mono, so we'll just put that here. And then we'll do the same on the drum section. We'll just put everything into mono, which is under 120 Hertz. What I will then do is play everything. I would like to make a bit more space for the kick, especially when the clap hits at the same time with it. So we'll go for a very subtle compression there. Let's go for 1.8 because my drum section is quite full on, so I do want to make a bit extra space for the kick, so those elements move out of the way when the kick is playing. Let's do that. So we'll put a compressor, we'll select sidechain, we'll hit the kick, we'll press play, and just listen where things sound balanced and the kick sits nicely with the drums. Right about there, getting about half a dB of gain reduction, so that just slightly clears out the space for when the kick hits. Then we'll put an EQ8. You can already see we've done most of the tidying up, so we don't really have many frequencies under, what is this, 200? Again, we'll just do that. Maybe I'll dial it back to 180 just in case we have any toms or percussions that are assisting the low end. What I then like to do is go into the mid-side mode, select the sides, and I like to do a boost around 11K. That's going to widen that top end sparkle on the hat shakers that we have, and it's going to spread it out nicely in the stereo field. So we'll do about a dB there. Let's see how that sounds. Then you can go and color your drums with something like a tape saturation, something mellow. I don't want it too hot, so I'm looking at the drive here and I'm dialing it back slightly just to make sure we're not driving this too hot and it's not getting completely compressed and distorted, because I want a bit of glue, and the saturation will give me that, but then I can easily overdo it. So again, we're listening and adjusting as we go. Let's have a look at the meters. Okay, that thickens the drums up. It thickens them up a bit too much, so let's do 10%. Just for a little bit of grit and character. Again, as I've probably previously mentioned, when we apply the same processing to a group of elements, it makes them sound more coherent. So that's the purpose of me putting the tape here. Also, I like that little sort of thickening effect it has on the drums, especially what I'm mainly hearing is on the clap and the open hat. So we'll leave that be with the settings we've just dialed in. Drawing with 10%. We've adjusted the drive and the output. Again, as you saw me dial these values in, I was listening, A being turning the plugin on and off, looking at the meter here, just to understand what exactly it does. If it makes the sound louder, I don't want that. I just want a bit of character. Then I don't want too much of it because it makes the drums sound a bit dirty and saturated. So it's always listening and making small adjustments, which are likely to give the best results. I'm hearing some transients hitting at a number of different places. So actually, let's go with the limiter here. Just catching those peaks, because the saturation can also introduce a bit more harmonics to elements, which then can cause some peaks in the drums. So at the end of the chain, I'm going to put my limiter, and I just want to make sure I catch some of those peaks, which can occur if I have that drum loop playing alongside a hat, or if there is a snare or a build-up. There's a number of scenarios which can cause spikes and clips and transients to hit more than usual in different places of the track. So as a precaution, I keep my limiter here, and that just makes sure that I catch about half to 1 dB of peaks where they occur, because they don't occur throughout the whole section. They just occur in some places. So also forgot to mention, some of my drum hits were either recorded from a drum machine, or when I was drawing the MIDI notes, the velocity was different. So you don't have the exact same volume of the hits. So again, the limiter helps there, just even them out, because when the velocity is not the same, that can also cause some issues. Of course, it's better because it sounds more human to the ear, but we just want to make sure once this track gets mastered and limited, we're not really clipping, we're not hitting over zero, and we're not getting this track overly saturated in places. So I leave the limiter here, and then I'm gonna go here to my parallel group that I did for the perks. Now I've added this wide stereo, which is a utility preset, I believe. Let's have a look. Yep, that's the utility preset that you can use, and what that does is makes the stereo much wider. Just goes to 200% here. And what I'm gonna do is I will put all my drums sent to the parallel compression, and I'll dial this back because it might sound different compared to when I was doing the perks. So now that they're both being sent there, actually, matter of fact, let's actually not send the perks. Let's just send the whole thing. What this does is it will send my drums to this return channel. They'll get compressed quite harshly. Then they'll get wide on the stereo. That's going to give me an extra, let's say, layer that will blend in with the original, so that will make my drums sound a bit wider and fuller. But we'll have to be careful how much we're mixing this in, because it may also make them a bit too wide and cause some phasing issues with the high end especially. So treat this as a separate signal chain that's used subtly and just adds slight bit of extra depth, if you will, to your drums. Let's just hear the compressed parallel compression signal here. Yeah, so quite wide and quite heavily compressed. You immediately hear it when I bypass. Makes my drums sound fuller. All right, so that's the drums done. Now let's have a quick look at the stereo. As you can already suspect, I'll put the utility. I'm gonna make sure everything is in mono under 120 Hertz. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give a bit of width to this whole group. Not too much, but about 110. I want my synths to be wide, moving around the stereo field, sort of doing occupying that that frequency range. All right, let's do an EQ8 here. Again, you can tell we've done most of the work. It looks nice and clean. Not much kicking about here, so same. I'll go into mid side and I'll just boost some frequencies that I like on the sides as well. Around 2-3K is usually very nice to boost for that high mid presence. Also, that's an area where our ears are quite sensitive to, so it's also pleasant and impactful to the listener. I'm adding a bit of saturation to get some extra harmonics. Let's see if this makes the channel louder. No, it's about even, so we'll go 80% on the dry and wet. And we'll leave that be, and I'll add again a bit of compression here just after the utility. Again, I want to make some space for the kick, especially with those kind of bassy sounds and effects I have here, so I'll go with a very quick release, so it goes back up very quickly after hitting the threshold. Okay, the limiter is not really catching anything, so we won't be using it on the stereo group. Now, when I hear everything playing with my processing, I think I will lower my bass top slightly. Let's go 1 dB down on that. it's always listening for these final levels, and once you have all the processing down, then you might start hearing certain things you might want to correct. Maybe an element sounds too low in the mix or too high, or in this case I heard some sharp frequencies in the drums, which I'm gonna go after as well real quick. Yeah, that sounds quite sharp, so let's dial that back a bit. I'll use this in stereo, and then what I'm gonna do is I'll put the widening EQ where I'm boosting over, well, let's do actually 11 kilohertz. I'll put it after the tape saturation. I want to boost the sound after it's been hitting the tape, so after the processing. And here I will just put this, I'll just bypass, go back to stereo, clean up the sharp sounds here. And then we'll add a bit of reverb, not to all of my drums. Might do a bit on the clap. A bit here on the top end, or on the drum loop, and a little bit on the hats as well. By the way, we're just using the Ableton default reverb here, but we're quite we are quite reserved with how much we are putting, because I don't want them to be super wide, especially when I'm doing this parallel compression here, which already adds that layer on top. So just a bit on the clap. Actually, I'm not even going to use it on the drum loop, just a bit on the hats and the clap. And that's about it with the drums and the reverb. And on the stereo, we can add a bit more. Now another thing to note that I like to do is I do a low pass, or actually that's a high pass with my reverb. So I'm not really pushing frequencies under 90 hertz. Actually, I might even go up to 150. I want the low and especially upper mids. I want them to be hitting the reverb, because again, low frequencies can cause muddiness, phasing, and we do want to avoid that. Okay, cool. That is done. Now in the last section, which is the master bus, I like to put a high pass at 20 hertz. Again, making sure there's nothing there. That also, in my experience, makes everything sound tighter, especially on big sound systems, as we've already discussed. We might try a glue compressor. I'm not sure we're gonna end up using it, but let's see if it brings the mix together a bit more. If not, I'm just gonna bypass it. Again, let's go to a 2:1 ratio, and let's dial that back and have a listen. We will use it very subtly at 50% because it does catch a bit of that snare clap sound. I see the gain reduction when those hit, so I just a little bit of glue on the master bus. You can use compressors. What I would advise against is using limiters, unless you're obviously trying to do a DJ master or something of that sort. But yeah, you don't want to kill the dynamics on your master bus. Let's see how we look on the analyzer. Maybe that was the spectrum. Yes. Hitting at about -18, -19. My graph looks good. I have presence on most bands, so usually it's a nice gradual curve that you're looking at without any obvious dips. Because if you do have those, then that means you are either missing some of those elements or you need to boost certain ones, but looks nice and gradual. I just wanted to add a bit here about 500-600 hertz, so that's where my bird group is playing. Just about 0.2 dB here and another 0.6 around that area. Let's go a bit wider here, but about 700, well, 5 to 700 is a good area to boost with sounds like percussions, just these low mid drums in general. Okay, I feel like everything sounds present, it's not overpowering, and this is a mix that I would probably listen back to a few times on different systems, but we'll go more into that in another tutorial. The last thing I do, because we have done a lot of work throughout the track, so I do a reference of the version I had before Mixdown, and I'm doing this using a plugin that's not a stock Ableton plugin, so this will be probably the only, well, not probably, definitely the only plugin we'll be using that's not stock Ableton, but I really swear by this plugin. It's very useful. It's the Metric AB. And what it does is you drop a reference track here. I've done the version I bounced from the project without any mixing, any processing, just a recording and arrangement. And we'll be able to clearly hear what we've done, because a lot of the things might have seemed very repetitive and similar to each other on the process. But as I said, it does make a difference in the end, and I think we'll be able to hear that once we match the two tracks. So what this does is it will play both at the given point, so wherever my track is playing in the project, it will align it with the reference, and it will also volume match it. So you'll be hearing the exact same section as long as it's the same track with the same starting point. You'll be hearing the exact same section, and then you'll be able to see what you've done without having any discrepancies in the volume. So let's go ahead and have a listen. Quite a difference, especially in the low end. Sounds extremely muddy, resonant. It's basically all over the place. To be fair, when I did export it, so all this processing we've done, all these cuts, these mono utility settings that we've used, they all make sure that the sound is controlled, it's in the right place, and it just sounds much tighter, much better balanced. Let's just have another listen, but I think the difference is quite significant between what the project was when I bounced it from my arrangement session and what it is after we've done all that work on basically every channel, starting from the low end. Yeah, I think that gives us a very good perspective on how these things add up, and what we get in the end of the process, and as a final result. So this is how I would approach a basic mixdown using Ableton stock plugins only, and I do hope that this was helpful. I hope you can take little bits from this process, and I really hope this helps you improve your mixes. Thank you for watching.